Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Coker-Hook, and this evening I have as my guest Chris Anderson, who is one of the co-founders of an organization called Assay Advisory. And what we're going to talk about today is something that I think is really important for who we are here in the Silicon Valley area, because we have a lot of companies that are starting up or that are emerging or that are looking to be purchased, or guys that are looking to purchase companies. And there's a whole bunch of information you need to know if you're actually going to do that effectively and intelligently. And Chris is here to help us talk about that. Good evening, Chris.
Hey,
Thanks
Dave.
for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming down today. And it wasn't raining as you were coming down today?
No, it's a beautiful day.
So this is really good. So, you know, here in San Francisco Bay Area, it's really a hotbed for business. For them is trying to get acquired. But then you have businesses that have been around for a long time that aren't knowing, you know, they're moving along and all of a sudden they decide, I want to find a way out. They haven't made an exit plan and they look to get themselves acquired. Isn't there a lot that you have to think about and understand? It's not just going up on Craigslist and saying, I've got a business for sale, is it?
Well, I'd love to try that actually sometime. I'm sure we find some interesting bargains. No, there's a lot that goes into it, obviously. So acquirers are fairly sophisticated. Whenever you're buying something, if you're buying a house, you're going to get your house inspected. If you're buying a business, you're doing a lot of inspection on your own between the legal people, the accounting folks, looking at all the numbers, and then the business people really trying to understand what is it that they're actually buying, and is that transferable to me? Could I actually acquire that? So there's a lot of work that goes into preparing companies to be acquired. Okay.
I was just reading in the last few days about a merger that's going on between, was it DuPont and Dow Chemical?
Right.
So at a macro level or a mega level, you've got these large companies that are coming together, and there's going to be stuff that changes, cultural changes, and all sorts of things that happen. And you kind of think that's going to be the case for large firms. We're getting down to the level of, you know, a small and medium-sized enterprise that's looking to leverage by maybe adding market activities by bringing on a partner or something like that. You have the same kind of issues and considerations?
It's even bigger. And actually, the culture and that alignment is, it either works really well for organizations, and companies put one company together with another, and that 1 + 1 = 3. And when you put two companies together that do not have an alignment, it all falls apart. You look at Time Warner buying AOL. You look at so many big corporations, you know, HP buying Compaq. Those things just, they didn't fit together well. Right. And from a business case, they sounded great on paper, but if you actually sit down and understand what are the pieces we're putting together, how will they work, it all starts with that alignment of culture. And if you don't have that, whether it's a big mega corporation like these $150 billion deals, or our clients who are small and mid-sized business owners, it's understanding who they are as an organization, what type of sale do they want, who are you selling to, and will they actually help you create this legacy that says, we put these two things together and it worked really well for everybody. Because if it doesn't matter what the numbers say, don't do that deal. It's going to be a mess afterwards.
You know, as you were mentioning that, one of the things that occurred to me is that a lot of times an owner of a business, especially a small enterprise or a medium-sized enterprise, they've developed this thing. It's almost like a child, right? They have tremendous amount of personal identity invested in this business, and it's not quite as easy as just saying, I'm going to sell this thing. So this thing about understanding the culture of the organization you're either merging with or selling to seems to me to have a lot of significance for somebody in that position.
Well, and just taking a step back even further, it's that business is very much a reflection of them. So it's who they are at work, it's who they are in their personal life. So it is all about their personal identity. You know, it's the widget lady or the guy who distributes this or the guy who makes some product or service or this construction guy. So everyone knows who these business owners are and what they do. And them stepping away, first building the business so that it's not solely dependent on them is the hardest thing most small and medium-sized business owners forget to do, that they want it to be dependent on them, because then they get to be Superman the hero every day, and all these people, they are thankful to me for having a wonderful job and providing for their families. But the mistake they make is then it's harder to extricate them, and it destroys value actually by just having the business about one person. So One, it's how do you make a business healthy and sustainable so that if that business owner wanted to step away, or if you have two partners, one decides, hey, it's time for me to move on and do something else, whether that's retirement or a new venture, but the business can go on and continue to thrive. That's the first thing that every business owner should always look to do, not build the business just around them. And then it gives you a lot more options when it comes to how do I transition ownership, whether it's to the next generation of employees, my kids, my grandkids, or I'm going to sell it and prepare it, for sale to transfer to somebody else.
So I'm guessing that most business owners, when they get started, aren't thinking that far ahead.
Heck no, they're all buying themselves a job. They don't want to work for someone else anymore. They just say, I don't want to work for this person. I'm tired of being told what to do, or I have an idea. I started it at my kitchen table, in my garage, in the back of a truck. And then they go and they start building a business. And most of them weren't really trained on how to grow and scale companies, but they're very entrepreneurial. They figure out how to get stuff done. So thinking about, are you selling this business someday? Heck no, I want to do this for the next 20 or 30 years. And then it's 20 or 30 years later, and they're kind of a little tired pushing that rock up the hill, and they have to start thinking about, so what do I do next? How do I get myself out of this?
Got it.
And that's a little different versus the culture in Silicon Valley, which is if you're going to walk in to talk to angel investors, if you're going to talk to VCs, one of the things that better be in your pitch deck is what is your exit strategy?
What is your exit strategy? Right. Yeah.
And there's a key reason why. They want their money back. At some point, I want my money back. If I can get a return of my investment, fantastic. Return on it, even better.
Right.
But what am I going to do to get my money back? So the culture here is a little bit differently with technology startup companies that are being funded by third parties versus if you start a company at your kitchen table, build it over years, you've got hundreds of employees, you didn't have to design an exit strategy. You never had to think about it.
Right. I was reading something several weeks ago about the number of small and medium-sized enterprises that are in the country. I mean, you've got a few mega corporations, but most of the businesses that are out there are these smaller, medium-sized companies. And so you and I were talking on the phone the other day about the fact that there's a high percentage of businesses that are owned and operated by the baby boomer generation.
Absolutely.
And they're just now starting to think about, what do I want to do? How do I want to move on from being a business owner to maybe retirement or whatever? But you had a couple of interesting points there. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so there was a forecast that I looked at when I first started in this business about 15 years ago, and it was a big curve that said between 2000 and 2025, here's the number of businesses that will be transitioning ownership. And we were kind of tracking along that curve until this little thing called the financial crisis happened in 2008. You might have heard about it.
I've heard about it, yeah.
It even hit your wallet a little bit like it hit mine. But just the number of businesses for sale obviously went way down for a number of reasons. Buyers said, well, I'm not going to buy someone else's business because if they can't run it during a recession, what makes me think I'm so smart that I can? But it's also the valuations would have come way, way down. So, and a lot of businesses went out of business during the Great Recession as well. So who was going to survive that was yet to be seen. So you have to kind of wait for that financial crisis to ebb and flow. And then the business owners have to do what? They have to build the thing back up again. They poured a ton of money into this. They lost money typically for a number of years during the Great Recession. Then they kind of have to build the valuation back up to where it was. You have to have a 2, 3 to 5 year track record to show, look, it's a growing, healthy, and sustainable business again. So you have this massive supply, hundreds of thousands of businesses that should have been selling, and they didn't.
And they didn't.
So now I think we're starting to see the leading edge of the number of businesses starting to come to market is starting to tick up. My biggest fear and concern has been this whole wave is going to come, and what happens when a big wave comes? It eventually crashes.
Yeah.
Some people are fine and can surf on the top of it, and they'll get out for a premium. A lot of other people are going to crash on the beach and won't be able to sell the business. And I've read a lot of studies about this, and anywhere between 20 and 40% of baby boomer business owners say when it comes time to retire, they're just going to turn the lights out and go home.
Really?
Not even because they haven't done anything to prepare the business for sale.
Oh.
So what happens with all the other ones who also haven't done anything, but they get to that point, they're 62, 75 years of age and just say, that's it, I'm done. What do I do? Oh, I haven't done anything to prepare my business. I just ran it for whatever I could
10,
put in my
20,
pocket.
30, 40 years, they've run the business and done whatever, and now, that's interesting to me because I can kind of relate to that environment, because I've seen business owners and I talk to business owners sometimes that are in that kind of that space. And What you guys do at your company, you actually will help these people figure out what they need to do in order to have a saleable commodity. I think a lot of people don't think of their business as a commodity, as something that's an entity that could be purchased or sold.
Well, exactly, because they never designed it, never built it to sell. All they did is design it to provide some product or sell some service, never to really kind of think about a transition of ownership. They see their friends who are selling businesses, and of course they see the big headlines, Dow, DuPont, and all these other big deals that are being done, but they've never thought about it for their businesses. It was a way of providing income for their family, and that's all it really was. So, you know, we started the consulting side of the business. So I've been doing M&A. My background, if you remember, I've been part of the management teams that built a number of companies. We sold a few of those, only had one good transaction out of all of those, and it was the one where I fired the investment bankers and just said, let me do this myself. I can do a better job and make sure I have a really good outcome. So the money will be fine for the investors, but I actually care what happens to my employees, my customers, and my suppliers the day after we do this deal. So I've been doing this for almost 15 years now, and part of what I was having conversations with business owners was they had never really thought about it, but just today's the day they woke up and said, I want to sell. My attorney, my financial advisor, my accountant told me, call Chris. Call me. What have you done to prepare? Nothing. Or why do you want to sell? Ready to move on and do the next thing. And oh, by the way, I want this amount of money. Great. I would love to get that for you. There's only one problem. You're not worth that. No one's going to pay you for that. So, and the reason why that they had a lot of risks in the business that they had not managed well, they didn't put the right systems and processes in place, or the business was built all around them typically. So what we have to prove when we're selling a business is every business has some secret sauce, a reason that it exists, that their customers come back to them to buy from them year after year. But that can't all be dependent on one person, can't all be in one person's head in particular. Usually these companies never sit down and write strategy papers or anything. So it's how do we prove that what you've built is transferable to the next person? And whether that's we're selling to another company, private equity firm's going to come in and install a management team, or we've got some individual who, yeah, he could start a business. He's in Silicon Valley, sees lots of startups, doesn't have an idea. He wants to buy something that's already has customers, that already has cash flow and employees.
Why create it if I can pick up something that's actually operational?
But we have to prove that that's transferable to them. And they'll pay a premium for them if we show that the company is truly ready to operate and stand on its own. It's healthy, it's sustainable. We've taken most of the risks out of the business, or at least have systems and processes to manage them. So that's what we'll start with is, if you have a vision of where you want to get to, what's the roadmap from where you are today to get there? And we'll take them through that whole transformation process, and then we'll get their deal done for them when they're ready and the business is ready to accomplish what they want for their legacy.
I want to talk about that a little bit more, but before we dig into that a little bit more deeply, I want to let the folks out there know that if they have any questions about what we're talking about today, that they can send those questions into info@referencepointtv.com. I'll make sure Chris gets that data, and then he can respond to it relative to maybe you've got a business you want to buy or sell, or maybe you're in this process and you have some questions or whatever. So let's get back to this a minute and talk a little bit more, Chris, about the process concept. I mean, here we are. Here you got a guy or a gal who's got a business and they've been operating it, and then or they want to get something, you know, that's operating. And this idea of putting in processes and procedures and things like that in order to make it less dependent on the individual. So, how do you go about that? I mean, what is it in the mindset of an individual that allows them that you have to get through in order to allow them to let loose of some of those control factors?
The biggest key is they have to want to change. They have to say, I have a vision for what I want to accomplish in terms of transitioning ownership of this business. Again, whether it's an internal or third-party transfer, to allow me to do that for this business to live on and be successful, I know I have to do something different. I can't just make it about me. So we talk to business owners. Some of them say, sounds great, but I don't want to do anything differently. I've been doing this for 42 years, and I'm not going to do it anymore. And that's fine. That's a personal choice that some of those folks make. And some of those are the ones who are saying, I'm just going to either turn it over to a key employee and wish them good luck, or I'm just going to turn out the lights when I'm done and just hang up my spikes and be able to go off and ride off into the sunset. But the clients that we engage with, they really say, I have a vision for what I want. I don't know how to do it myself. Can you help me? So it's that willingness to change. And then, so we do an entire assessment. We have a very specific framework that we use on how we assess companies. So we look at risks in 6 different buckets. We assess the cost. Most business owners are great at, controlling their costs to the best of their knowledge and ability, but they don't necessarily benchmark themselves against their peers. So they may have a cost advantage and don't even know it, or may have a cost disadvantage and don't know it. They may have issues with their revenue that if I'm a buyer coming in and I see, Dave, you've built a great company, but this one guy, this one company, he's 70% of your revenue. And I know he's your golf buddy and he's your age and he wants to retire too. So if I buy your company, does that revenue go away because you guys are just going to be golfing all around the country and he's going to sell his business to someone else? So it's just assessing all those different factors. It's looking at the quality of the assets in the business.
I think a lot of guys don't even think about those things because they've developed these relationships over. That's part of the key thing if you're going to be successful in the business is developing relationships.
Absolutely.
And then it's those relationships that sustain you through some of the leaner times, et cetera, because, okay, well, hey, I know Dave and I'm going to work with him because I know what he can do. I know what kind of a guy he is. He's going to treat me right, et cetera, et cetera. But then you get to potentially the problem, of what I'm understanding you to say, of it being the cult of personality tied to this business. So
Absolutely.
It's not really about how this company can service companies D, E, F, and G as well as you're doing A, B, C, and L. Because it's all about Dave and Fred, working with Fred so.
And they can have that confidence that, well, I've had this relationship for 25 years. It's not going anywhere. And it's not going anywhere as long as they're sitting in that seat.
Right.
The second you change out the person sitting in that seat, nobody likes change. But if you've decided, Dave, you're leaving and someone else is going to sit in your seat, maybe me as your customer, I should think about that too. Or my employees, it's like, okay, am I going to keep every one of these employees? There's no way every employee will stay because that new owner coming in, their personality is different, their behaviors are different, their vision and desire of what they want to do and the changes that they want to make in the company are different. So anytime you put change in motion, everyone in the whole, all the stakeholders start to question, well, what does this mean to me and should I be making changes too?
So how do you mitigate that issue? Because most small and medium-sized enterprises are going to have that kind of a situation of whoever started the company, and it's built around that personality. So how do you unravel that Gordian's knot?
Well, it is about starting to giving other people authority, other people responsibility. So as a business owner, especially when you start around the kitchen table, you have about 500 hats on. You don't know it the day you start the business, but you have about 500 hats on. And over time, it's how do you start taking those hats on? Who has responsibility for something? What authority do they have? How do I hold those people accountable? And it's driving that depth into an organization, but also having multiple touch points, especially with key clients. So obviously I want my outside sales guy to have a good, strong relationship with whoever the key buyer is, but I want my inside customer service and sales people to have that relationship, other relationships in the organization. I want my operations people, whoever providing, whether it's a service or a product that we're getting to somebody, I want to make sure they have relationships in the organization. I want my accounts receivable person to know their AP person and when their birthday is and things like that. So how do you create multiple touch points so that the relationship is deeper?
It becomes with the business, the company. And the company is not just one person, it's now multiple people.
That's the key. And also it's having the contracts that aren't cancelable on 30 days notice. I mean, I love seeing those. Like, do you have contracts with your customers? Yes, we do. And you look at them like, look, I could all walk away tomorrow. So that's not very transferable.
That's a whole other area
but it's all about revenue and maintaining those relationships.
Yeah.
Because if I have a 2-year agreement with a customer and I'm buying this business, 6 months it's going to take for me to transition. Those last 18 months, it's up to me to prove that I can deliver value to the customers, the clients consistently, that they're going to want to still do business with us even though Dave has decided to retire. So that's the key. I mean, you've got to have the runway to allow the new owner the ability to secure that customer as well.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about timing on something like this. I mean, you can't wake up in the morning and say, all right, I want to sell my business today or in the next 2 weeks. What kind of, for those businesses that haven't thought this through from day one, of which I'm thinking is probably 99.9% of them, what kind of a runway is there to reach that point where you really have a sustainable entity that can be transferred and you can let go of, and it's not going to fall apart?
Well, first part is, it was funny in 2009, even 2010, got a lot of those phone calls of, how quickly can you sell my company? And I learned very quickly, the first question I have to ask is, will you be able to make the next 2 payrolls? And if the answer was, well, I can make 1, like, okay, there's nothing I could do to sell a company in that window. So first, the process of selling a company, it's a 6 to 12 month process. And that's if someone's ready today, count on it taking 6 months just for us to do our diligence, for us to write the offering memorandum, for us to be able to build the target list, take it out to market, negotiate with potential buyers, get the LOI done, go through all the diligence process again, get the attorneys involved to write all the documents and everything, and get closing and funding and all those things. So that's a minimum 6 month process.
Right.
Occasionally you can go faster, but count on it being at least 6 months, and that's if everything goes perfectly.
But you have to be prepared. You have to be at a point where you can actually begin that.
Or desperate.
Or desperate.
Yeah, they both work. So if you're highly motivated, I mean, you can get it done faster if you're willing to take a discount on it. But honestly, I mean, the process, when we're engaging with most clients, it's at least 3 years in advance. Some of them have longer. Just think about putting a management team in place, setting the vision and strategy, getting the right people on the bus, starting to work through all the change management you have to for all the systems, all the processes, whether it's, hey, we've always thought about entering a new market or launching this new product. It's going to take time to develop those, time to take those out to market, and then to start to roll that out. So you've got to show that you've got a track record of a year and a half, 2, 3 years that, look, this new product is working, all the changes that we made, they're here, they're sustainable. So yeah, it's really about a 3-year process.
Wow.
That being said, we do have companies who just say, I'm done.
Right.
Just sell me today. And again, because it is at least a 6 month process, we're still doing the same assessment, and we come up with a project list and say, you now have a second job. That second job is clean up your company while we're starting to take it out to market.
Right.
So there's a lot of at least kind of those risk things. It's getting the contracts signed. We see distributor agreements, and well, we have them.
Yeah, but they're not executed.
Well, they're handshake.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's like, well, let's get those things signed,
nice. Yeah,
or your costs are a little out of control. I think we can make some changes here. So we can work through some of those issues pretty quickly.
Is there a difference in this process or anything related to what we're talking about if it's more of a professional service type organization versus a product company versus a physical service company like a landscaper or a contractor and stuff like that? Are these things any different?
No, the process is the same in terms of going through the sale process, but in terms of what buyers are looking for, it's all the same. Every buyer wants to manage and mitigate risk, so they are looking at the revenues, the costs, they're looking at the quality of assets, they're looking at what potential liabilities. The reasons people get sued are the same whether you have a product company or a service business. If I have a contracting company or I'm a distribution company, if someone's hurt on the job, if there's sexual harassment, if there's other illegal things going on in the company and I can get sued for it, doesn't matter. If I'm violating wage and hour, it doesn't matter what type of business you have. If I'm not paying overtime, I've misclassified my employee. So all the reasons to get sued are the same. Looking at the quality of the management teams, it doesn't matter what the business is. Could it grow and sustain with the team that you have, or is all the horsepower in one person and they're looking to retire?
Right.
Or we've got people that are good at running the business today, but I want to take it from a $20 million company to $50 million, and I can't do it with these people.
Got it.
So if that's a huge change management project for me as the new owner, I'm not going to pay you a huge premium for it. And if I think it's too onerous a job, I might not even buy the company.
Got it. Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left here. So what should we, in terms of the things that as a potential buyer, are there 3 or 4 key things that they need to be thinking about? And then as a potential seller, are there different key things that they need to be thinking
Absolutely.
about?
So the seller's mentality, first and foremost, should start with the legacy. What is it that you want to create when you're transitioning this ownership? Because there are such a wide variety of options. Most investment bankers and business brokers only tell you about a couple of them, which is sell your darn company, because that way I make money.
Yeah, right.
But there are other options in terms of whether it's family, whether it's a key employee, a key management team, or have all the employees own this thing. So what are you trying to accomplish with this? I mean, what would be the right story that you want to tell your employees and your customers and your suppliers? and those friends and family. So when you're done with this whole thing, and because this was your personal identity, don't you want to be proud of what this thing is going on to be? Because as you said, it is their baby, and now the baby has grown up, and they've gone off and gotten married to somebody else. And don't you want to tell the great story that my daughter married this great guy, my son married this wonderful woman. I mean, they're just fantastic together. You want the same thing for your business. So think about that legacy. Think about the money that you need to allow you to do whatever it is that's next for you, for your family, any charitable interests you have. And then on the buy side, it's completely the opposite. Do not fall in love with the business. It's a very rational process. Be willing to walk away from any deal if you're not seeing exactly what you want to see, or getting the answers you want, or can't structure the deal in the way that you can manage the risk appropriately, or you're not convinced that those kind of core assets and capabilities of the organization can be transferred to you. Be very rational about it. Kill your own deal if you have to.
Interesting.
It's a hard one. I mean, because people do fall in love with it.
Well, I can see how that would be.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's real interesting. Wow. Yeah. From the standpoint of the buyer, you have to be very, like you say, emotion. It's sort of like Spock. Let's go at it from a Mr. Spock perspective.
Exactly.
Very, logical.
You have to feel it in your heart because it might become your life.
Right.
But be willing to see. I was working on a deal recently, and we just saw some issues with the business and had to say thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Well, this has been great. So, and I hope folks out there that you've been following along with what we're talking about. So if you are potentially interested in purchasing or potentially interested in selling a business, there are some things you have to think about. And Chris, this has been, I'm hopeful that the folks that are watching this have started to absorb some of this knowledge, because as you say, there's a lot of companies coming down the pike here that are either going to be able to be purchased or that are going to want to be sold. And so if they get their act together on this, it'll be really good. So we really appreciate your coming on here today and having this conversation on a reference point. So ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, if you have any questions, send them to us at info@referencepointtv.com, and we'll see you next time on Reference Point.